on understanding military organization. For 112 years, he had served in the defense legions of the Cavalry conquered. He had studied every major military doctrine adopted by the Galactic Compact: officer corps, fleet command, operational logistics, strategic planning, chain of command, military history. There were differences between civilizations. Some favored decentralized command, others demanded absolute hierarchy. But every competent military shared one fundamental principle: officers led, soldiers followed. It was as true as gravity. The joint exercise had been organized to improve interoperability between the human Commonwealth Marine Corps and the Compact Expeditionary Force. Officially, it was called Exercise Unified Horizon. Unofficially, it was an opportunity to observe humanity. Ever since first contact, human military performance had become something of an uncomfortable mystery. Their technology was good, not revolutionary. Their ships were reliable, not exceptional. Their numbers were respectable, not overwhelming. Yet somehow human formations consistently performed beyond every prediction. Colonel Thalen intended to discover why. The command briefing began exactly on schedule. A holographic terrain map filled the center of the operations room. Rolling hills, a river valley, several small towns, a simulated humanitarian crisis following a meteor impact, supply shortages, infrastructure damage, displaced civilians. Military cooperation would be required. No combat, only coordination. Captain Lyra Sen stepped forward. She looked younger than Thalen had expected. Calm, professional, confident without arrogance, she introduced herself with crisp precision. "Good morning, I'm Captain Lyra Sen, commanding Bravo Company. For today's exercise, our primary mission is civilian stabilization." She began outlining the operation: landing zones, medical stations, supply routes, engineering detachments, communications relays. Every decision appeared logical. Every contingency had been considered. Colonel Thalen found himself quietly impressed. The young officer clearly knew her profession. When the briefing ended, silence settled over the room. Thalen waited for questions. Instead, Captain Sen looked toward the back of the room. "Gunnery Sergeant." Every head turned. Standing quietly near the wall was an older human in simple field utilities. No decorations beyond service ribbons, no officer's insignia, no command staff markings. Just 3 chevrons over crossed rifles. He had spent the entire briefing saying nothing. Colonel Thalen had assumed he was technical staff. The Marine scratched a note into a weathered notebook. Then he looked up. "The aid station." Captain Sen nodded. "Yes." "I'd move it." Thalen frowned. Captain Sen did not. "Reason." The sergeant stepped toward the terrain display. He pointed to a cluster of buildings. "Third warehouse." "The roof's too old." Several alien officers exchanged puzzled looks. Captain Sen simply asked, "What else?" "The access road." He traced a finger across the map. "Too narrow. Heavy transports will block ambulances." He moved farther along. "That drainage ditch floods." "Doesn't matter today." He looked toward the weather forecast. "But it'll matter tomorrow." An engineer interrupted. "There isn't any rain forecast." The sergeant nodded. "I know." Silence, then he added, "The exercise starts at 8. The storm arrives tomorrow afternoon." Several compact meteorologists immediately checked their forecasts. One frowned. "We're only showing a 12% probability." The Marine shrugged. "I've seen that cloud pattern before." Captain Sen nodded once. "Move the aid station." No debate, no committee, no request for additional analysis. The order was simply accepted. Colonel Thalen leaned toward one of the human observers. "Who is that?" "Gunnery Sergeant Elias Mercer." "What position does he hold?" "Company Gunnery Sergeant." "I understand the title. What authority does he possess?" The human smiled. "Officially." "Yes. He advises the commander." Thalen nodded, "As I suspected." Then he watched Captain Sen erase part of her operational plan, based entirely on the recommendation of a non-commissioned officer. The exercise began 3 hours later. Engineering units established bridges. Medical personnel assembled treatment centers. Supply vehicles dispersed throughout the valley. Compact observers monitored every movement. Everything proceeded according to plan. Almost. Just before noon, one of the alien logistics officers approached Colonel Thalen. The humans have relocated nearly half their support vehicles. Why? No explanation. Thalen looked toward the convoy. It was moving farther from the river. Strange. The original position had been entirely acceptable. He located Captain Sen, Captain. She turned. Colonel, why alter your logistics plan? She answered as though the reason were obvious. Gunnery Sergeant Mercer suggested it. The colonel looked around. Mercer was nowhere near the command post. He found the older Marine kneeling beside a young lance corporal, not discussing operations, teaching. The younger Marine was adjusting a radio antenna. Mercer quietly repositioned it by a few centimeters. The signal immediately strengthened. The older Marine handed the radio back. The lesson lasted perhaps 30 seconds. Then he walked away. Another Marine stopped him, asked a question, received an answer, another. Everywhere Mercer went, someone sought his advice. That evening, the exercise controllers released the second phase. The simulated weather front arrived. Heavy rain, river flooding, road closures. The original aid station selected by the compact planners became inaccessible within 2 hours. The original logistics area flooded. One bridge washed out. Traffic backed up exactly where Mercer had predicted. Captain Sen's revised plan continued operating almost without interruption. Colonel Thalen replayed the morning briefing 3 separate times. There had been no satellite data supporting Mercer's conclusions, no classified intelligence, no hidden reports, just experience. Late that evening, Thalen found Captain Sen reviewing the day's performance reports. He placed a data pad on the table. I've confirmed something. She looked up. Oh, your original plan scored 98%. She smiled. It was a good plan. He nodded. It was. He paused. The sergeant's version scored 100. She laughed softly. That sounds about right. The colonel frowned. You don't seem surprised. I'm not. You trusted him before seeing any evidence. Captain Sen closed the report. When I graduated from the academy, I knew doctrine. She looked toward the operations field, where Marines were still quietly working beneath portable floodlights. Gunnery Sergeant Mercer knew Marines. Colonel Thalen watched the older human helping 2 young engineers recover equipment from the mud. No speeches, no orders shouted across the valley, no visible command, yet somehow the entire company seemed to orbit around him. For the first time in his long career, Colonel Oryx Thalen found himself asking a question he had never imagined possible. If the captain was in command, why did everyone keep asking the sergeant? Chapter 2, The Things Officers Never See. Colonel Oryx Thalen spent the evening reviewing Captain Lyra Sen's operational plan. It was excellent. Every objective had been met. Every supply convoy arrived on schedule. Every engineering team completed its assigned task. Every civilian shelter reached full operating capacity. The exercise evaluators had awarded it one of the highest scores ever recorded. And yet the report kept bothering him, not because of what had happened, because of what had not. The following morning began with something unexpected. Nothing, no briefing, no command conference, no strategic update. Instead, Gunnery Sergeant Elias Mercer walked through the company area carrying a clipboard. No escort, no fanfare, no officers. He simply walked, stopping every few minutes, looking, listening, occasionally making a note. Colonel Thalen watched from a respectful distance. Mercer had not spoken to a single officer. Instead, he spoke to junior Marines. A lance corporal adjusting a pack. A private cleaning a vehicle. A corporal checking medical supplies. Each conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. None seemed particularly important. Thalen activated his recorder. At 06:18, Mercer stopped beside a Marine working through breakfast. Morning, Rodriguez. Morning, Gunny. You eating? Yes, Gunny. Mercer looked at the untouched meal beside him. No, you're not. I'll eat after this. No. The Marine sighed. Yes, Gunny. He sat down and started eating. Mercer continued walking. At 06:26, he stopped again. Morning. Morning, Gunny. Where's your rain gear? My locker. Go get it. It's sunny. It won't be all day. At 06:41, he asked another Marine, how many spare batteries? 4. You need 6. Yes, Gunny. Colonel Thalen frowned. None of this had anything to do with tactics. Captain Sen found him watching. You look confused. I am. She glanced toward Mercer. About Gunny. He appears to be inspecting small things. She smiled. Exactly. The exercise begins in 3 hours. I know. He isn't discussing strategy. No. He isn't reviewing operational plans. No. He hasn't entered your command tent once. Captain Sen folded her arms. He doesn't need to. Colonel Thalen looked back toward Mercer. The older Marine had stopped beside a young communications specialist. The Marine removed the specialist's pack, adjusted the shoulder straps, and handed it back. The young Marine smiled. The entire exchange lasted perhaps 20 seconds. I don't understand, Thalen said. Captain Sen nodded. Most visitors don't. She pointed toward the company. What do you see? Marines. What else? They're prepared. She smiled. Why? Thalen looked again. Uniforms, equipment, weapons, medical kits, radios, everything appeared identical, everything exactly where regulations required. Captain Sen waited. Then she quietly asked, who do you think made sure of that? Before Thalen could answer, exercise control interrupted the morning. A simulated emergency. A bridge had collapsed. 2 engineering platoons would require immediate redeployment. Communications became deliberately disrupted. Supply schedules shifted. Entire sections of the operational plan changed. Compact units immediately requested guidance from headquarters. Human Marines started moving. Nobody appeared confused. Nobody waited. Junior leaders reorganized convoys. Vehicle commanders redirected traffic. Combat engineers gathered equipment. Medical teams adjusted evacuation routes. The entire company adapted almost instantly. Colonel Thalen searched for Captain Sen. She was speaking with the exercise controllers. She was not issuing orders. She was not directing traffic. She was not coordinating logistics. The company was functioning without her. He finally found Mercer. The Gunnery Sergeant stood beside a muddy intersection, watching, not commanding, watching. A corporal approached. Gunny. What's your plan? The corporal explained. Mercer nodded once. Good. One thing. He pointed toward a transport vehicle. Move that truck another 20 meters. Why? If that bridge gives way, you'll want room to turn around. The corporal nodded. Got it. No formal order, just experience. An hour later, exercise control announced a secondary bridge failure, exactly where Mercer had pointed. The truck turned around without delay. The convoy never stopped moving. Colonel Thalen slowly lowered his datapad. That afternoon, he requested access to the Human Marine training curriculum. He expected advanced tactical doctrine. Instead, he found page after page of subjects that seemed almost absurd. How to pack equipment, how to maintain boots, how to inspect uniforms, how to organize supplies, how to supervise meals, how to identify exhaustion, how to mentor junior personnel, how to correct mistakes without humiliating people, how to notice problems before they became emergencies. He looked at Captain Sen. This can't be your leadership curriculum. She nodded. It is. It's mostly ordinary. She smiled. War is mostly ordinary. She pointed toward the operations field. You know what officers spend most of their time learning? Strategy, planning, coordination. She nodded. Important things. Then she looked toward Mercer. You know what Gunny spent 30 years learning? At that exact moment, Mercer quietly took a wrench from a young mechanic, adjusted one bolt, handed it back. The engine started immediately. He continued walking. Captain Sen smiled. He learned everything else. That evening, Colonel Thalen reviewed the day's recordings. Not once had Gunnery Sergeant Elias Mercer done anything dramatic. No heroic speeches, no brilliant battlefield maneuvers, no dramatic acts of leadership. He had simply prevented hundreds of tiny mistakes, each one insignificant. Together, they marked the difference between an organized company and a failing one. For the first time, Colonel Thalen realized something profoundly unsettling. The Galactic Compact trained officers to command battles. Humanity trained sergeants to make sure there was still a functioning force when the battle began. Chapter 3. The day the officers disappeared. On the 3rd day of exercise Unified Horizon, every human officer vanished. At least that was what the scenario required. The announcement arrived at precisely 900. Exercise control transmitted a single message across every command frequency. Simulation update. Enemy electronic attack successful. Senior command network unavailable. Officer communications disrupted. Continue mission. Colonel Oryx Thalen waited. This was the moment every compact military dreaded. Without officers, nothing happened. Orders had to be reestablished. Authority confirmed. Responsibility reassigned. Entire formations typically spent precious hours reorganizing before meaningful work resumed. That was simply how armies functioned. He turned toward the Human Marine Command Post. Captain Lyra Sen acknowledged the message. Looked toward Gunnery Sergeant Elias Mercer. The older Marine nodded once. Then Captain Sen climbed into a communications vehicle. For the remainder of the exercise, she would be unavailable. Colonel Thalen blinked. That's it. One of the Marine observers smiled. Pretty much. The command tent grew strangely quiet. No replacement commander appeared. No emergency staff meeting. No frantic radio traffic. Instead, squad leaders gathered around their platoon sergeants. Platoon sergeants spoke briefly with company staff NCOs. The conversations lasted less than a minute. Then everyone walked away. The Marines simply kept working. A bridge section needed relocating. It moved. Medical teams discovered an unexpected group of simulated casualties. Treatment areas expanded. Supply trucks encountered blocked roads. Drivers selected alternate routes. An engineering vehicle broke down. Another vehicle quietly assumed its assignment. Nobody requested permission. Nobody demanded new orders. The company adapted as naturally as breathing. Colonel Thalen frowned. This violates your chain of command. The Marine liaison tilted his head. How? Nobody is receiving orders. They already received them. When? Every day for the last 20 years. That answer made no sense. Determined to understand, Thalen followed Gunnery Sergeant Mercer. The older Marine was not issuing commands. He was asking questions. Status. Bridge complete, Gunny. Outstanding. Fuel. 80%. Keep it above 60. Medical. We're short one trauma kit. Mercer nodded toward another vehicle. Borrow theirs. Communications. Relay towers unstable. Move it before lunch. That was all, no speeches, no elaborate planning, just dozens of tiny conversations. Thalen finally interrupted. Gunnery Sergeant. Mercer looked up. Colonel. Who is commanding this company? Mercer answered without hesitation. Captain Sen. The colonel stared. She's unavailable. For the exercise? Exactly. So who's making decisions? Mercer looked genuinely puzzled. The people standing in front of the problems. Colonel Thalen frowned. Without authorization. Mercer smiled. They're authorized. By whom? Me. The answer stunned him. You're telling me every corporal is authorized to make operational decisions? Mercer shook his head. No. The colonel relaxed slightly, then Mercer continued. They're expected to. Before Thalen could respond, a young sergeant jogged toward them. Gunny. Mercer turned. We've got two routes. The sergeant pointed at a map. One's faster, one's safer. What do you think? Mercer did not even look at the map. What's the mission? Medical resupply. Then, the younger sergeant nodded immediately. Safer. Why? We're carrying medicine. Mercer smiled. There you go. The younger NCO hurried away. Colonel Thalen looked after him. You never answered the question. I did. No, you made him answer it. Mercer nodded. Exactly. The older Marine leaned against a transport vehicle. If I solve every problem, what happens when I'm not here? The colonel did not answer. Mercer continued. My job isn't to have all the answers. It's making sure everybody else learns how to find them. The afternoon brought another complication. Exercise Control declared a simulated communications blackout across half the operational area. Compact formations immediately halted. Standing procedure required confirmation from higher headquarters before continuing. The requests began flooding every available frequency. Permission to proceed. Permission to reroute. Permission to adjust objectives. Permission to act. The Marines never transmitted a single request. Instead, squad leaders consulted platoon sergeants. Platoon sergeants consulted Gunnery Sergeant Mercer only when necessary. Most never did. Problems were solved where they occurred, not 3 levels higher. Late that afternoon, Exercise Control published the performance statistics. The compact units had completed 64% of their assigned objectives. The human Marines completed 98%. Despite losing every commissioned officer for most of the exercise. That evening, Colonel Thalen found Captain Lyra Sen her simulated isolation had ended. She was reviewing maintenance reports, not battle reports, maintenance reports. "I have a question." She smiled. "I've noticed." He ignored the joke. "Your company functioned all day without officers." She nodded. "It did." "Weren't you concerned?" "Not particularly." "You trusted them that much?" Captain Sen looked toward the motor pool, where Gunnery Sergeant Mercer was quietly teaching a young mechanic how to diagnose an engine by sound alone. "I wasn't trusting luck." She smiled. "I was trusting 30 years of Gunny Mercer." Colonel Oryx Thalen followed her gaze. For the 3rd straight day, he had been looking for the secret behind the human Marines. Advanced doctrine, superior tactics, brilliant officers. He was beginning to suspect he had been searching in entirely the wrong place. Human officers commanded the mission, but the sergeants built the people who could accomplish it, even when no officer was there to tell them how. Chapter 4, The Schoolhouse. Colonel Oryx Thalen expected Gunnery Sergeant Elias Mercer to spend the 4th day correcting mistakes. Instead, Mercer spent it creating replacements. The morning began before sunrise. No exercise alarms, no simulated attacks, no command briefing, just 24 young Marines standing in a half-circle behind the company maintenance area. Some were corporals. A few were sergeants. Most looked tired. All of them carried notebooks. Mercer stood in front of them with a metal ammunition crate serving as a table. Colonel Thalen watched from several meters away. "What is this?" he asked Captain Lyra Sen. She followed his gaze. "Leadership development." "They already hold leadership positions." "Yes." "Then why are they still being trained?" Captain Sen smiled. "Because rank is not the same thing as being ready." Thalen looked back toward the group. On most compact worlds, promotion ended formal instruction. A soldier proved competence, received authority, then performed the role. Humans appeared to treat promotion as permission to begin learning a harder one. Mercer placed a damaged radio on the crate. "Scenario," he said. "Your squad is 6 kilometers from support. Communications are intermittent. 1 Marine has a foot injury. You are behind schedule. What do you do?" A corporal answered first. "Continue the mission and report the injury when communications return." Mercer looked at him. "Why?" "The injury is not life-threatening." "Not what I asked." The corporal hesitated. "Because the mission still has priority." Mercer nodded. "Fair answer." Then he looked toward the others. What did he miss? A young sergeant raised her hand. "The cause of the injury." "Good." Mercer looked back at the corporal. "Why is the Marine hurt?" "I don't know." "Exactly." He lifted the damaged radio. "You're treating the problem you can see." He tapped the radio. "What if 3 more Marines have the same injury by nightfall?" The corporal frowned. "Then it's an equipment issue." "Maybe." "Bad boots." "Maybe." "Improper load." "Maybe." "Terrain." "Maybe." Mercer leaned against the crate. "You do not lead by collecting answers. You lead by noticing patterns before they become casualties." The Marines wrote that down. Thalen did too. The next exercise looked even less military. Mercer handed every student a meal packet. "Inspect it." They opened the packages, checked seals, expiration dates, calorie counts. 1 Marine found a damaged wrapper. Another found nothing. Mercer waited. Then he asked, "Who has eaten?" Several hands rose. Most did not. "Why not?" A sergeant answered, "We're in training." Mercer nodded. "And when does training end?" No one answered. He looked around the group. "You cannot lead hungry people while pretending hunger is weakness." He pointed toward the meal packets. "Eat." The Marines obeyed. Colonel Thalen watched in disbelief. "This is leadership instruction." Captain Sen nodded. "Yes, he is teaching them to eat." He is teaching them to notice when others do not. That requires a school. It requires repetition. Mercer moved to the next lesson. Sleep schedules, equipment inspections, morale problems, family emergencies, alcohol abuse, fear, anger, pride. The subjects grew increasingly personal. Thalen had expected tactics. He found human behavior. One scenario involved a Marine who had begun making minor mistakes. A missed inspection, a late report, an improperly secured weapon. Mercer asked the group what they would do. "Correct him," one corporal said. "How?" "Formal counseling." "Why?" "Because the pattern is becoming disciplinary." Mercer nodded. "Maybe." He looked toward another student. "What else?" "Ask what changed." Mercer pointed at her. "Start there." The first corporal frowned. "He is still responsible for the mistakes." "Yes. So why excuse them?" "I did not say excuse them." Mercer's tone remained calm. "I said understand them." He stepped closer. "If a good Marine becomes unreliable, something changed. Your job is to find out what. And if it is simply laziness, then you correct laziness. And if his mother is dying." Silence. Mercer looked around the group. "Same mistake. Different problem. Different leader." Colonel Thalen felt the sentence settle uncomfortably. Compact discipline was simpler. Rules existed. Violations received consequences. The system was efficient. Human leadership appeared to demand something far more difficult. Judgment. The class continued for 3 hours. Mercer lectured for perhaps 20 minutes total. The rest was questions. What do you see? What are you assuming? What happens next? Who has not spoken? What does the mission require? What do your people need? Every time a student answered too quickly, Mercer made them explain. Every time someone relied on regulation, he asked what the regulation was trying to prevent. Every time someone gave a perfect answer, he changed one detail and made them try again. By midday, Colonel Thalen understood why the Marines kept seeking Mercer's advice. He had trained them to distrust easy certainty. After the class, the young leaders dispersed. Most returned directly to their squads. A few remained behind. One corporal approached Mercer carrying his notebook. "Gunny." Mercer looked up. "What have you got?" "I answered 3 scenarios wrong." "Probably more than that." The corporal looked embarrassed. Mercer smiled. "So did everyone else. I should have known better." "Why?" "I'm a corporal." "That means you are responsible for learning faster. Not knowing everything." The young Marine looked down at his notes. "How long before I'm ready?" "For what?" "To lead without asking you." Mercer considered the question. "Never." The corporal looked alarmed. Mercer continued. "You should always ask somebody. Maybe not me. Maybe one of your sergeants. Maybe the Marine standing beside you. Maybe the person who knows the machine better than you do." He tapped the notebook. "Confidence is useful. Thinking you no longer need help is dangerous." The corporal nodded slowly, then returned to his unit. Thalen approached. "You deliberately allowed them to fail." Mercer looked toward the departing Marines. "It is cheaper here. You expect them to make mistakes during training. I expect them to make mistakes forever." The answer was so immediate that Thalen almost missed its importance. "You do not believe training eliminates error?" "No." "Then what is the purpose?" "To make mistakes smaller." Mercer picked up the damaged radio, and to make sure people recognize them sooner. The colonel studied him. "In the compact, advanced instruction is reserved for officers." "I know." "You disagree." Mercer shrugged. "I think anybody responsible for lives needs education. Even a corporal. Especially a corporal. They may command only 4 or 5 soldiers." Mercer looked directly at him. "To those 4 or 5, that is the whole war." Thalen had no answer. That afternoon, the company moved to a live training range, not for combat, for evaluation. Each junior NCO received a small team and a deliberately incomplete task. Establish a communications relay, move medical supplies through damaged terrain, repair a disabled transport. Secure temporary shelter for displaced civilians. The instructions omitted crucial details. No complete maps, no perfect supply lists, no direct supervision. Colonel Thalen assumed this was an oversight. Captain Sen corrected him. It is the lesson. What are they learning? That orders are always incomplete. Thalen looked toward the field. Then how can performance be judged? By what they notice. The first team began constructing a relay tower. Their sergeant checked the terrain, then stopped. The assigned location provided excellent range. It also stood at the bottom of a drainage slope. She moved the site uphill. No one had told her to. The second team loaded medical supplies. Their corporal noticed the transport could carry everything in one trip. He split the cargo between 2 vehicles instead. When Thalen asked why, the corporal answered, because one vehicle can break. The third team reached a damaged shelter. The assigned task was structural repair. Their sergeant inspected the occupants first. 2 were dehydrated, 1 needed medication. She delayed the repair until medical support arrived. The exercise evaluator marked the delay, then awarded the team the highest score. Thalen frowned. She failed the stated timeline. Captain Sen nodded. She protected the mission. The mission was repairing the shelter. The mission was helping the people inside it. The distinction would not have existed in a compact evaluation. The order was the order. Human NCOs appeared trained to search beneath the words for intent. By evening, every team had completed its assignment. None had followed the initial instructions exactly. Most had improved them. Mercer gathered the young leaders one final time. He did not praise the fastest team or the strongest or the one with the best score. He asked each NCO to describe one decision they regretted. They did, openly. No one hid mistakes. No one blamed subordinates. No one appeared ashamed to admit uncertainty. Mercer listened, then said, "Good." Colonel Thalen stepped forward before he could stop himself. "Why is that good?" The Marines turned. Mercer answered without irritation, "Because they know where the lesson is." Thalen looked around the group. "In my military, leaders are expected to project confidence. So are ours. You have spent the entire day making them discuss failure." "Yes." "Does that not weaken their authority?" Mercer shook his head. "Pretending never to be wrong weakens authority." "Admitting a mistake. That depends on what happens next." Mercer faced the young NCOs. "You make the mistake. You own it. You fix it. You teach it. Then the unit gets better." He looked back toward Thalen. "That is authority." The colonel watched the students depart. Each returned to a different squad. Each carried notes. Lessons, questions, corrections. Mercer had spent one day training 24 leaders. Those leaders would train hundreds of Marines. Some would eventually become gunnery sergeants, first sergeants, sergeants major. Their knowledge would spread through units Mercer would never visit. Across bases he would never see. Into wars he might not live to witness. Thalen finally understood. The human NCO Corps was not merely a layer between officers and soldiers. It was a schoolhouse embedded inside the military. Every experienced Marine became an instructor. Every junior leader became both student and teacher. The institution reproduced itself constantly, not through orders, through correction, mentorship, example, repetition. Colonel Thalen looked toward Mercer. "One day they will replace you." Mercer nodded. "That is the plan. Does that not diminish your importance?" The older Marine smiled. "If I leave and everything falls apart, I failed." The answer was almost offensive in its simplicity. Compact commanders built personal authority. Human sergeants built replacements. Thalen looked across the training field. Young corporals inspected equipment. Sergeants corrected one another. A lance corporal taught a private how to secure a load properly. The lessons were already moving. By nightfall, Mercer was no longer the only teacher. That, Colonel Oryx Thalen realized, had been the point from the beginning. Chapter 5, Officers Come and Go. Colonel Oryx Thalen noticed the pattern only after reviewing 12 years of Marine personnel records. Human officers moved constantly. They completed assignments, transferred to other units, attended advanced schools, joined larger staffs, accepted promotions, returned to operational commands. Sometimes a company received a new commander every 18 months, occasionally sooner. By compact standards, the practice appeared reckless. Commanders were supposed to become inseparable from their units. A Cavalry Legion officer might lead the same formation for decades. Their authority deepened over time. Their soldiers learned their habits. The commander learned every strength and weakness in the unit. Humanity seemed to replace officers just as they became fully useful, and yet the units did not collapse. That was what troubled Thalen. They changed commanders. They did not lose identity. He found Captain Lyra Sen inside the company operations center. She was packing. The exercise had nearly concluded, and Bravo Company would return to its permanent base within 2 days. Her equipment had already been sorted into labeled cases. Files transferred, reports signed, responsibilities reassigned. Thalen stood in the doorway. "You are leaving." Captain Sen looked up. "Eventually." "You have received new orders." "No." "Then why pack?" "Because commanders always leave." The answer came without sadness, without drama, simply as fact. Thalen stepped into the room. "How long will you command this company?" "Another 14 months, if the schedule holds." "That is all." "It is a normal assignment." He looked genuinely disturbed. "You will spend years learning this unit, then surrender it." "Yes." "To someone who may not know these Marines." "Yes." "That is inefficient." "Sometimes." "Dangerous." "Sometimes." "Then why do it?" Lyra closed one case. "Because the unit cannot belong to one officer." Thalen thought about that. In the compact, command authority was personal. The formation's character often reflected its commander. Aggressive officers created aggressive units. Methodical officers created methodical units. When command changed, the formation changed with it. Humans appeared to consider that a flaw. What prevents the next captain from undoing everything you built? Lyra smiled. "Gunny Mercer." Thalen expected humor. There was none. The company formed for inspection later that morning. Captain Sen stood at the front. Gunnery Sergeant Elias Mercer stood several steps behind her. The arrangement was familiar now, the officer visible, the NCO quiet. The company aligned itself around both. Lyra issued several corrections. Mercer said almost nothing. He did not need to. A corporal noticed a loose strap and fixed it before he reached the Marine. A platoon sergeant saw 2 people standing too close and adjusted the formation. A young sergeant quietly checked that every junior Marine had eaten before arrival. The standards enforced themselves. Thalen leaned toward the Marine liaison. "Mercer is not correcting them." "He already has." "When?" "For years." After the inspection, the company conducted a command transition exercise. Thalen assumed it had been added for his benefit. Captain Sen denied it. "We do this regularly." "Why?" "So command change is boring." He frowned. "Boring." "Boring is good." The exercise began with Lyra leaving the command post. A different officer entered, First Lieutenant Corrine Vale. She had spent only 6 weeks with the company. Young, capable. Clearly nervous. Thalen watched her approach the operations table. The staff immediately began briefing her. Personnel status, equipment readiness, supply levels, training schedule, unresolved maintenance problems, disciplinary issues, family emergencies. Every important detail had already been organized. Nothing depended on Captain Sen's memory. Nothing existed only inside her head. The company's knowledge belonged to the company. Lieutenant Vale listened, asked questions, made one decision. Then another. She hesitated over a training change. Mercer stood nearby, silent. Finally, she looked toward him. "Gunny." "What are you thinking, ma'am?" "I asked what you think." "I know." She frowned. Mercer waited. The lieutenant looked back at the schedule. "If we delay the field exercise, maintenance gets another day." "Yes, ma'am." "But the weather will be worse." "Yes, ma'am." "The company needs the training more than it needs perfect vehicles." Mercer nodded. "There you go." She issued the order. Thalen watched her shoulders settle. Mercer had not commanded. He had made command possible. Later, Thalen found the gunnery sergeant in the equipment bay. Mercer was reviewing a repair log with one of the platoon sergeants. The colonel waited until they finished. "You knew what decision she should make." Mercer looked up. "Probably." "Why not tell her?" "Because next time I might not be there." "You continue saying that?" "It keeps being true." Thalen folded his arms. "Captain Sen says officers must leave, so the unit cannot belong to one commander." "She's right." "Then what does the unit belong to?" Mercer considered. "The mission." "The Marines." "The standard." Thalen waited. Not you. Mercer smiled. Definitely not me. The colonel opened the personnel records on his tablet. In the past 12 years, this company has had 7 commanding officers. That sounds right. 3 executive officers. Probably more. Dozens of platoon commanders. Yes. Yet many of the senior enlisted personnel remained. Mercer nodded. That is normal. Why? Continuity. The word appeared simple. Its consequences were not. Officers rotate to gain broader experience, Mercer said. NCOs hold the unit together while they do. Then you consider officers temporary. We consider assignments temporary. Command included. Especially command. Thalen stared at him. In my military, such a statement would be considered disloyal. Why? Because it diminishes the commander. Mercer shook his head. No, sir. It protects the command. He gestured toward the equipment bay. Captain Sen brings perspective. She makes decisions only the commander can make. She accepts responsibility. She sets priorities. She fights for the company when higher headquarters gets unreasonable. Thalen listened, and you. I make sure the company still knows how to be a company while she does all that. What happens when she leaves? I brief the next one. And if the next captain is poor? Mercer's expression changed slightly. Not alarm, recognition. Then the NCO Corps matters even more. Thalen had not expected the honesty. You would oppose the commander. I would advise the commander. And if the advice is ignored, I keep the Marines ready. And if the commander gives a harmful order, Mercer looked directly at him. Then we have regulations. Senior officers, inspector channels, legal obligations, professional standards. The answer came without hesitation. The system anticipated flawed officers just as human building codes anticipated flawed builders. It did not assume every commander would be brilliant. It built safeguards around the possibility that some would not be. Thalen felt the parallel before he fully understood it. Human military organization was not based on faith in exceptional leaders. It was based on survival when leaders were ordinary. Captain Sen joined them. Colonel. He turned. I have been studying your command system. That sounds dangerous. He ignored the comment. You deliberately separate authority from continuity. Lyra leaned against a storage case. Explain. The officer has authority. The NCO Corps preserves the unit. She nodded slowly. That is close. Why not give one person both? Because one person leaves. Or fails. Or dies. Or gets promoted. Or becomes exhausted. She gestured toward Mercer. The company cannot be rebuilt every time the commander changes. Thalen looked between them, so the captain determines where the unit goes. Mercer answered, and the NCOs make sure it remains itself when it gets there. That afternoon, Bravo Company welcomed another temporary commander. Then another. Each received the same test. A new officer entered. The NCOs provided accurate information, not flattery, not selective facts, the truth. The officer made decisions. The unit adapted. Some decisions were better than others. The standards remained. Vehicles were maintained. People were fed. Training continued. Discipline held. Junior leaders kept learning. The company bent around new command styles without losing its shape. Thalen watched one captain favor speed. Another favored caution. One spoke constantly. Another rarely did. Mercer adjusted to each, not by surrendering the company's standards, by translating those standards into the language each officer understood. With one, he used data. With another, he used examples. With a third, he waited until the officer asked the right question. The skill was almost diplomatic. Near sunset, Captain Sen and Colonel Thalen stood beside the training field. Marines were dismantling shelters, cleaning equipment, preparing vehicles for departure. Mercer moved among them, still correcting, still teaching, still asking whether people had eaten. Thalen watched him for several minutes. Your military history celebrates officers. So does yours. Generals, admirals, commanders. Lyra nodded. They make the big decisions. And the sergeants. They make those decisions possible. He looked toward her. Then why are they less visible? Captain Sen smiled faintly, because things working correctly rarely look dramatic. A transport engine started across the field. A junior mechanic grinned. Mercer nodded once, then sent him to help another crew. No ceremony, no recognition. The lesson moved on. Thalen opened his report and added a new section. Human command continuity. He began writing. Human units do not depend upon uninterrupted officer leadership. Commissioned officers provide command authority, direction, accountability, and operational perspective. Non-commissioned officers preserve standards, experience, discipline, and institutional identity. He paused, then added another sentence. The officer may be the current commander. The NCO Corps is the memory that remains when command changes. He looked toward Captain Sen. When you leave, will you miss this company? Of course. Will it miss you? She considered. I hope so. That sounds uncertain. She smiled. I also hope they do not need me. Thalen looked back toward Mercer. The Gunnery Sergeant was already preparing the next generation of leaders. The next captain would arrive, learn the unit, change it, then leave. Mercer would leave one day too, but the schoolhouse he had built inside the company would remain. The corporals he had trained would become sergeants. The sergeants would become Gunnery Sergeants. The standards would move forward through people who might never know where each lesson began. Colonel Oryx Thalen finally understood why human units survived constant change. Their continuity had never depended on keeping one leader forever. It depended on making sure leadership existed everywhere. Chapter 6, The Invisible Foundation. The final phase of exercise Unified Horizon was not a battle. It was worse. A simulated orbital strike had shattered the infrastructure of Belisar province. Power grids failed, water systems stopped, transit lines collapsed, hospitals overflowed, communications became unreliable. Tens of thousands of civilians required food, shelter, medical care, and evacuation. The exercise controllers gave the coalition one objective: restore stability within 48 hours. Colonel Oryx Thalen studied the operational map. This was the kind of crisis compact officers understood. Large formations, complicated logistics, multiple agencies, constant uncertainty. Success would require decisive command. He expected coalition headquarters to become the center of everything. For the first 2 hours, it did. Generals assigned sectors. Staff officers established priorities. Engineers received objectives. Medical units received casualty projections. Transportation units received routing plans. Every order moved downward through the command structure. The plan looked excellent. Then reality began dismantling it. The primary bridge into the Eastern District could not support heavy vehicles. A fuel convoy arrived with the wrong connectors. 2 shelters lacked sanitation equipment. A civilian hospital had power but no clean water. A water purification unit had arrived, but no one had brought the correct hoses. An alien medical team carried supplies that did not fit human transport containers. A communications relay worked perfectly until the backup generator overheated. None of the problems were strategic. Together, they stopped the operation. Colonel Thalen stood inside coalition headquarters while officers tried to rebuild the plan. New orders were written, routes changed, priorities shifted. Every correction created another delay. Then he noticed the human Marines were already moving. Captain Lyra Sen remained at the central command post. She coordinated with coalition leadership. Reported progress. Requested heavy engineering support. Adjusted company objectives. Gunnery Sergeant Elias Mercer was somewhere else. Thalen found him in a school gymnasium being converted into a civilian shelter. No map table, no command staff, no ceremonial briefing. Only noise, children crying, workers carrying cots, medical teams unpacking supplies, Marines dragging power cables across the floor. Mercer stood in the middle of it all with a grease pencil and a piece of cardboard. Someone had written a list across it. Water, power, food, medical, sanitation, security, blankets, transportation. The list looked insultingly simple. Thalen approached. This is your command post. Mercer glanced toward the cardboard. Temporary. Where is your operations display? Captain has it. Your communications suite. In the truck. Your staff. Mercer pointed around the gymnasium. Busy. A corporal hurried over. Gunny, the water tanks are here. Purification unit. 3 minutes out. Hoses. The corporal hesitated. Wrong fittings. Mercer nodded toward a maintenance closet. School irrigation system uses the same diameter. It isn't rated for drinking water. Then flush it, sterilize it, and mark it temporary. Yes, Gunny. The corporal left. Thalen frowned. You improvised outside approved specifications. Mercer looked at him. People need water before the correct hose arrives. What if contamination occurs? We test it before distribution. The answer came immediately. Not careless, not reckless. Temporary, controlled, good enough to keep the operation moving. Another Marine approached. Gunny, shelter intake is backing up. Why? Families are stopping at the registration tables. How many questions? 26. Cut it to 5. The aid agencies require the full form. They can finish it after people are inside. The Marine nodded. Got it. A medical officer interrupted. We need another treatment area. Mercer looked around the gymnasium. The cafeteria. No privacy barriers. Use the stage curtains. They're not sterile. They're walls, not bandages. The officer stared for half a second, then smiled. Understood. Within minutes, the cafeteria became a clinic. The queue began moving. Water testing started. The first children received blankets. Mercer crossed one item from the cardboard. Thalen watched him. You are making decisions outside your specialty. No, sir. You are not a physician. No. An engineer. No. A civil administrator. No. Then what qualifies you to direct all of this? Mercer looked around the gymnasium. Somebody has to connect the specialists. The colonel studied the room again. The doctors understood medicine. The engineers understood water systems. The aid workers understood registration. The logisticians understood supplies. Each knew a part of the problem. Mercer kept those parts from blocking one another. A generator failed in the western shelter. Mercer sent 2 mechanics. The mechanics discovered the generator was not broken. It had been fueled with the wrong mixture. They drained it, replaced the fuel, restarted it. An hour saved. A supply convoy arrived at the wrong entrance. Mercer redirected the vehicles before they blocked ambulances. A team began distributing food without accounting for allergies. He stopped them. A young Marine grew impatient with a frightened family. Mercer pulled him aside, not loudly, not publicly. The Marine returned calmer. Thalen began recording every decision. By midday, the list exceeded 300. None would appear in the official operational summary. No single decision deserved mention. Together, they made the shelter function. Captain Sen arrived briefly in the afternoon. She carried updated orders from Coalition Command. Mercer met her near the entrance. Status: Shelter S at 60% capacity. Waters: online. Power: primary and backup. Medical: operating. Security: quiet. Problems: food distribution is slow. Transport to the northern district is worse. Need anything from me? 2 buses and authority to use the rail maintenance tunnel. Lyra considered for a moment. The tunnel is outside our assigned route. It is also open. I'll get approval. Mercer shook his head. Get forgiveness. She looked at him. The civilians wait another 4 hours if we ask. Captain Sen glanced toward the families filling the gymnasium, then toward Thalen. The colonel expected hesitation. Instead, she nodded. Use it. I'll explain it upstairs. Thank you, ma'am. The exchange lasted less than 30 seconds. The captain returned to headquarters. Mercer returned to the floor. Thalen followed him. You advised her to violate the route plan. I advised her to use a safe route that the plan missed. And she accepted responsibility. That is command. The colonel looked toward the tunnel access map, and you accepted the practical consequences. That is my part. The words were simple. The division was not. Captain Sen held authority. Mercer held the operation close enough to the ground to know where authority needed to bend. By evening, Coalition headquarters had issued 23 major directives. Gunnery Sergeant Mercer had made more than 1,000 small decisions. He checked sleeping areas. He moved generators away from air intakes. He ordered Marines to rest before exhaustion made them dangerous. He reassigned an excellent mechanic who was failing as a team leader. He found an alien child hiding beneath a transport and spent 6 minutes persuading her to come out. He changed meal schedules when the elderly could not stand in line. He ordered lights dimmed in one section so exhausted families could sleep. He sent a corporal back to apologize to a civilian. He stopped a lieutenant from placing fuel too close to a medical tent. The lieutenant bristled. Mercer explained. The fuel moved. No argument continued longer than necessary. At 2300, the Eastern District reported stable water service. At 1:15, the hospital received power. At 2:40, the last stranded civilian convoy entered a shelter. At 3:10, Mercer finally sat down. Colonel Thalen found him on an empty supply crate outside the gymnasium. The older Marine held a cup of coffee that had gone cold. "You have been awake for 22 hours, Thalen said. Mercer nodded. "So have you." "I was observing." "That can be tiring." Thalen ignored the remark. Coalition headquarters credits Captain Sen's company with restoring the district. "Good. They will probably commend her." "She earned it." "They may commend you." Mercer shrugged. Thalen looked through the open doors. The shelter had become quiet. Thousands of civilians slept beneath temporary lights. Water flowed, medical teams worked, generators hummed. Nothing looked heroic, everything worked. The colonel sat beside him. "I counted your decisions." Mercer looked amused. "Why?" "I was trying to determine which one changed the operation." "And I could not." Mercer took a drink of cold coffee. "That is usually how it works." "The general made the strategic decisions." "Yes." Captain Sen translated them into a company mission. "Yes." "And you?" Mercer looked back toward the gymnasium. "I kept little problems from becoming big ones." Thalen considered the answer. "That sounds inadequate." "It is most of the job." The following morning, the exercise controllers announced the result. The coalition had restored stability in 39 hours, 9 hours ahead of requirement. Alien commanders praised coordination. Human officers praised initiative. News teams interviewed generals beside the operational map. No camera entered the school gymnasium. No one filmed the improvised water fittings. The shortened intake forms, the sterilized irrigation hose, the stage curtains used as clinic walls, the apology ordered from one Marine to one frightened civilian. Those details disappeared into success. Colonel Thalen finally understood why NCOs were so difficult to study. Their value became visible mainly when they were absent. A missing general created confusion at the top. A missing sergeant created failure everywhere else. Before the human Marines departed, Thalen requested one final conversation with Mercer. They stood beside the transport ramp while Bravo Company loaded equipment. The colonel looked at the rank insignia on Mercer's uniform. "I still do not understand your position." Mercer smiled faintly. "You have spent 6 days studying it." "I understand what you do." "Then what is missing?" "Why you are not an officer." Mercer considered that. "Because I do not need to be." "You hold authority." "Some." "You advise commanders." "Yes." "You direct operations." "When necessary." "You train leaders." "Yes." "You maintain discipline." "Yes." "You make decisions affecting thousands of lives." "Sometimes." Thalen spread his hands. "That is command." "No, sir." Mercer looked toward Captain Sen, who was signing the final departure report. "That is supporting command." The colonel remained unconvinced. Mercer continued. "The captain decides what must be done. I help make sure the company can do it. And if the captain fails, I advise her. And if you fail..." Mercer looked toward the Marines loading the last vehicle. "Then somebody I trained had better catch it." Thalen followed his gaze. Corporals checked equipment. Sergeants counted personnel. Platoon sergeants reviewed manifests. A young Marine corrected another without waiting for Mercer. The system was already moving without him. The colonel finally asked the question that had remained since the first day. "What exactly is a human sergeant?" Mercer thought for several seconds, then answered, The person responsible for everything the officer should not have to notice. Thalen looked back toward the shelter. Fuel, food, water, fatigue, discipline, maintenance, morale, thousands of small details, everything beneath strategy, everything holding it up. Mercer climbed aboard the transport. Colonel Oryx Thalen remained on the landing field as the human Marines departed. He had begun the exercise believing armies were built from the top down. Generals created plans. Officers issued orders. Soldiers obeyed. Humanity had built something different. Its officers still commanded from the top, but beneath them stood a professional structure of teachers, maintainers, disciplinarians, mentors, and practical leaders. A foundation so ordinary that outsiders barely noticed it. A foundation strong enough to carry an army. Years later, Thalen's final report became required reading in compact military academies. Its conclusion contained no tactical theory, no weapons analysis, no recommendation for new technology, only a warning. Do not measure a human formation by the number of officers it possesses. Count the sergeants. Human Archive Entry 7342.9, the Human Non-Commissioned Officer Corps. We believed armies were built by generals. Humanity agreed. Then they showed us who built the generals. Officers planned missions. Sergeants built the people who carried them out. They preserved standards when commanders changed. They taught judgment where orders ended. They created leaders before authority was granted. When communications failed, they continued. When plans broke, they adapted. When young officers hesitated, they steadied them. When soldiers struggled, they noticed. The galaxy searched for the weapon that made human armies difficult to defeat. It was not a weapon. It was the quiet professional standing beneath the chain of command, holding it together.